But I still have a little concern. And my concern is specifically that, with all this great stuff happening in our space, with all the momentum we see, with everything that we're doing, all of us in this room, there's still this dark cloud floating over us in Europe, Greece, Italy, Silvio Berlusconi, right? These guys are going to screw it all up for us, I think. Maybe. So when I have doubts and questions, I always turn to the blogosphere. I figure bloggers know more than all of us. One of my favorite bloggers is Felix Salmon from Thomson Reuters. He always has an interesting take on the financial ecosystem, on the global economy. And he's actually got a new website that he's launched called Counterparties, which tries to aggregate the best content from around the web for financial and global economy and everything else. So one of my favorite people, and I'd like to welcome him here on stage to talk to all of us about a global perspective and how the pieces fit together. Felix?
Thank you very much. Cheers. Oh, I should get my, can I borrow your clicker?
Okay.
Thank you. I need one of these. I'm going to try to ignore the slides mostly. Hi, welcome everyone. I was just in the green room back there explaining that it's the end of the world as we know it, so you should all just go off to the airport, and you've got much better things to do than sit here listening to people talk about ad networks. So I am going to be here for about half an hour or so. There's the macro bit and then the media bit. I've tried to cover them both. The macro bit is important because, well, obviously it's macro, it's the world. But as Ryan has explained to me, like, you guys are important now too. Like, this is not some little niche, fast-growing tech business you're in. You are a major part of the global advertising industry, and that means that what happens to the global economy affects you much more than when you're a little fast-growing business. And what that means, in turn, is that things like this are going to be increasingly important to you. That you're going to see. I mean, do you remember when, people started doing lots of layoffs because they were worried about the economy, back in 2008, 2009. This kind of thing affects online advertising. It's not growing like it used to anymore. It might be shrinking if things like this continue to go on. So by the way, these are like a few various things which I probably won't have time to cover. But this is the big one, as you know. We've had 2 defenestrations of prime ministers over the past week, pretty much. In Italy and in Greece, they won't be the last. And the outlook's really bad. I'm not going to try and sugarcoat this one. We have what I call the return of the bond vigilantes, right? All of these countries, one of the things they have in common, and one of the things they have in common with the United States, actually, and most advanced nations, is that they have substantial budget deficits which they cannot fund by simply borrowing from their populace anymore. They borrow from banks. They borrow from bond investors, institutional investors, and those bond investors and institutional investors have woken up and they have said, you know what, we're not going to lend to you anymore. And that's unsustainable. Right now, the only people lending to these countries is the European Central Bank in various forms, European Financial Stability Facility, and maybe the IMF. These kind of people don't have enough money to fund, well, certainly Italy. They have enough money to fund Greece and probably Portugal, but Spain's a bit dodgy and Italy's a non-starter. What we're seeing here, you can see where the bailouts happen, right? You can see how, come around 8.6%, Greece gets bailed out. Come around 8%, Ireland gets bailed out. Come around 8%, Portugal gets bailed out. Italy's going to be hitting 8% pretty soon, and we can't afford to bail out Italy. We don't have enough money to bail out Italy. And the bond yields have reached the point of no return. They're so high now, and Italy has so much debt, that simply having bond yields in this sort of 7 to 8% range where they are right now means that it's just simply inconceivable that Italy can grow fast enough to prevent a debt spiral where the interest payments just wind up capitalizing. Even if it could fund itself at 7%, even if it could place those bonds, which I don't think it can, the debt dynamics would get out of control incredibly quickly. So this is very bad. It could mean the end of the Eurozone. European politics are fractious, and cometh the hour, cometh the backbiting and the finger pointing, and we don't have a European leader, someone strong, who can make who can bash some heads together and bring everyone into the same agenda and make something happen. We need a plan. Plan beats no plan, and there is no plan, and there will not be a plan. Right now, most likely scenario is basically that things fall apart. The Germans have actually scarily started talking about sort of shrinking the Eurozone to a core set of countries who are going to increase their interlinkages on fiscal fronts, fiscalizing a core Eurozone and basically jettisoning the periphery, which is this lot. And these guys are not going to go happily. They like being part of the euro. What you don't see here, because it doesn't go back far enough, is the massive convergence trade, it was called, back in the 1990s, when Italian bond yields came down from 15% to 4%, because everyone said, hey, you're part of the euro now. You can borrow cheaply. We're going to throw money at you. And this was great for Italy, and they don't want to go back to the status quo ante, and the Greeks certainly don't. Like, being part of the EU is the one thing which turns Greece from being just a, another Balkan basket case into a genuinely respectable country. So yeah, this is going to be very bad, and it's going to affect all of us. And I think that I feel a bit the same way now as I felt back in 2007 when the credit crunch was making it look as though it was the end of the world as we knew it, but the Dow was at 14,000 hitting new highs. And you're like, why are people not getting this? It took a while, but they got it eventually, and it was quite painful. And meanwhile in the US, this is going on. There's many things wrong with the US. I don't need to tell you that. But this is at the heart of it, right? Is that we borrowed way too much money to finance this massive housing boom and construction boom and bubble. The bubble burst. House prices came down. They're going to continue to go down because they're still overpriced. And the leverage in the system is still much bigger than it should be and can be. And so we're going to need to deleverage much as the Europeans are. Now, the European leverage is on the sovereign level, right? Cutting sovereign debt is horrible because that means sovereign defaults. Sovereign defaults are one of the most painful and nasty and macroeconomically devastating things you can do. Housing defaults, we've gone through a bunch of them. We will go through more. And they're not as painful, but they're still pretty bad. And what we should really be doing right now is biting the bullet and proactively trying to reduce the amount of housing debt out there, especially for the 10+ million homeowners, 13 million homeowners who are underwater, right? If you owe more on your house than the house is worth, you should have the principal on your mortgage reduced so that you can have some equity, so you have some incentive to keep on paying your mortgage rather than simply walking away. Now, right now, there are like 80% of underwater mortgage holders are paying their mortgages, often at quite ridiculously high interest rates because they can't refinance because they're underwater. This is a market failure. It's unsustainable. If any of you as business people behaved this kind of way, your shareholders would fire you for being, for abandoning your fiduciary duty. Like any corporate property owner If they have a mortgage which is worth more than the property, they walk away from that property, assuming the mortgage is non-recourse, which it normally is. Individuals can and should and will do the same thing. The banks are not marking their mortgages to what they're worth. They're holding them on their books. When I say the banks, I mean Fannie and Freddie. I mean us. We're pretending that these mortgages are worth much more than they actually are. And this kind of hear no evil, see no evil approach is going to bite us in the ass quite painfully. And we should do something about it now. We should be reducing principal now. We should be keeping people in their homes now. We should be reducing the amount of foreclosures now. We should, most importantly, well, not most importantly, but one of the big things we should do is make a distinction. I want, if you leave here with one big idea on the macro front, we should make a distinction between foreclosures and evictions. Right now, if you foreclose on a house, the homeowner gets booted out. There's no reason why that should be the case. If a bank forecloses on a house, that homeowner still loves that house, still wants to stay in that house has a fair market rent. Allow the homeowner to stay in the house, paying the fair market rent. You don't have a forced sale. You don't have people trashing their house as they leave. You maximize the cash flows from the house. You keep people in their homes. This is an incredibly win-win-win situation for everyone. And why people aren't doing it, I have no idea. It shocks me. There are small little organizations in places like Boston. There's a group called American Homeowner Preservation. There's a bunch of people doing this privately on a small scale, but we need to do it very publicly. We need to get Fannie and Freddie involved in this, and how we're going to do that? Well, we need to bash some heads, or a head together, in the head in question being Ed DeMarco, the administrator of Fannie and Freddie. He runs something called the FHFA. He's being very obstructionist right now. He's the interim head. We should be able to install someone a bit more sensible. Why we haven't is a classic case of Obama administration spinelessness. So moving swiftly on, we have this, which I don't think I need to really mention too much, but this is one of the other. This is what we're seeing here is a financial crisis, right? As opposed to a normal common or garden recession. All these other colored lines are your various common garden recessions going all the way back to 1948. None of them were really financial crises. The red one, which is what we're in right now, a much deeper, much longer jobs crisis than we've ever seen before, or certainly since the 1930s. And it's pretty L-shaped. We're barely recovering even now, even 3 years after the crisis. And so this is how fragile the US economy is. If an economy this fragile gets hit by the world's largest trading bloc, Europe, kind of falling apart, that is in and of itself more than sufficient to drag us down into a double-dip recession and have lots of nastiness, because these people aren't working. If you're not working, you're not earning, you're not spending. We might have a little bit of up and to the right there, not so you'd notice. We gained 80,000 jobs last month, something like that. It's barely enough to keep pace with population growth, and it's fragile. It's what's known as stall speed, right? If it stalls a little bit, if there's any kind of shock to it, it can crash. And then what you need to turn an economy around, which is falling, which is going into a recession, is so much greater than what you need to add a bit of a push to an economy which is growing slowly. What we have right now is an economy which is growing slowly. We should push this, speed it up. I'm talking, fiscal stimulus, this kind of thing, because if we don't, any kind of exogenous shock, like Europe, or like another lurch downwards in the housing market, will be enough to bring us back into the second dip of a double-dip recession. And once we've done that, then we're, excuse my language, but fucked. Because you can't recover from that. The only way we recovered from the last one, the only way we broke the downward spiral last time was through an $800 billion stimulus. And what the chances are of being able to get an $800 billion stimulus through Congress right now if we go there again. So, the jobs bill that Obama has is a step in the right direction. We want to be pushing this economy forwards as much as we can. Don't want to be worrying about the debt dynamics, because if you go back to this graph, these are the bond yields right now. The US is down here at 2. There's no bond vigilantes in the US. So let's take advantage of that and make sure that we have a healthy economy which can withstand the pretty nasty shocks which are certain to come sooner or later. The Europeans are quite good at kicking the can down the road. We don't know when Europe is going to fall apart, but we also know what Greek politics is like. We know what Italian politics is like. We know how many prime ministers there have been in Italy in the past 50 years. We know that at some point, leadership is going to fail. I think it's now. I don't see any leadership in any of these countries right now, which is up to the task. But even if it's not now, it'll be next year or the year after that. And when that happens, we need to be able to withstand it. And right now, we're not in a state to withstand it. But let me move on to the media side of things, which I think is a bit more germane. I have three ideas which I want to run by you. The first one comes from a lunch I had a couple of days ago. You're all in the online advertising business. The online advertising business is huge. It is more or less, by orders of magnitude, the dominant business model on the internet. And this is a contingent fact. It didn't have to be this way. When Mark Andreessen was first building Mosaic, the first web browser back in the early 90s, he invented a whole bunch of really fundamental parts of markup, like the image tag. And one of the tags which he had in the very first Mosaic browser was a payments tag. And I'm not entirely sure how this works. You should probably ask him about this. But somewhere along the line, there was talks with MasterCard, and that payments tag disappeared. If payments had been built into the internet from day one, you guys wouldn't be here right now. We wouldn't have an ad-driven business model. We would have a micropayments-driven business model. Now, the US is incredibly backward when it comes to payments. We don't have a real-time payment system. We have this antiquated thing called ACH when you pay people. It takes hours or sometimes days to pay people. We don't have basic chip and pin technology on our credit cards. We find it more or less impossible. If I just want to pay you some money, I can't do that without going through, what is this thing? You have these things called paper checks. People write checks in this country? I mean, seriously, what century are we in here? Can you name another country on planet Earth where people still write checks? I don't think you can, actually. Seriously. And so what you guys are doing is capitalizing on the backwardsness of the US payment system. Because if the US payment system was actually efficient, if there were micropayments which cleared at par, which means if I pay you $1, then I lose $1 and you gain $1, instead of someone like PayPal taking 2.7% along the way. If it was built into the architecture, and if I write you a check for $1, that's exactly what happens, by the way, even though the costs of processing that check are so much greater than the costs of any electronic transaction. So this is a system which is going to evolve. It is going to get faster. It is going to get more efficient. We don't know when. And given the number of banks in the United States and how difficult it is to get anything done here, it's probably going to take quite a long time. So you're safe for the time being. But I would worry about this if I were you. Because at some point, we're going to wake up. And when that happens, when big banks all get together, buy some startup payments company, incorporate it into everything they do, and we all have NFC chips on our phones so we can just wave our phones at each other to pay, and it's built into HTML6. At that point, a whole new world of business models on the internet comes around, and the ad model maybe becomes much less compelling. That's just one idea. The next idea I have is that you guys are loving life right now because you're buying space at ludicrously low rates. This is an email I got a few days ago. People, someone was offering me $50 to put text links install text links into my old blogs. This is, you may have seen this. This is Hamilton Nolan being offered $130 to do much the same thing at Gawker. This is how much people are willing to pay, right, for just a link online for Google juice, for what I call sleazy SEO. This is how valuable content can be on the internet, and you guys are massively underpriced. If you look at the amount that people pay for, text ads from Google and the likes, it's a fraction of these numbers. So there's some kind of, I don't know what it is, but there's an inefficiency there. And if I was in your shoes, I'd wonder where that inefficiency was and why it wasn't being arbitraged. But the main thing I wanted to talk about is my own little baby. This is my website, counterparties.com. You should all visit it every day because you learn all of the what's going on in the world. It is the first mainstream media site which is nothing but external links. So it's a bit prettier than Drudge or Fark or TechMeme, but we stole lots of ideas from all of those people. It's one of those things where we have this philosophy that the more you send people away, the more they come back. And I'm quite excited about it. And it's quite social, and it's rather cool. And it's powered by a cool little startup called Percolate, which basically gets all of these links from the people I follow on Twitter and the people I have in my Google Reader and my OPML list. It's quite an exciting little website. And it's based on the idea that filter is the new search, right? What Brian was talking about is this idea that he wants to come to a website and see that website change according to who he is. He wants to be given different headlines and presented with a personalized view of the world. And in fact, I think that's what's happening with things like Flipboard and basically with Twitter. If I'm using Twitter as my news provider rather than a website, that's what I'm doing. I'm going, but it's becoming social. I don't think that if you're going to make a distinction between social and personalization, if you're going to just say we're going to personalize for you in a non-social way, I don't think that works, frankly. The thing about news sites is that they're hard to do. This is a full-time job for my colleague Ryan McCarthy to put this website together. This is not something you can do with an algorithm. People want to read stories they did not know that they wanted to read until they saw the headline and wanted to read it, right? There's what we do in the media, on the editorial side, is we edit. It's a massively important job. We find the stories, we put them out for you to love, and you can't automate that. Lots of people have tried, lots of people have failed. The only way you can semi-automate that is by outsourcing to other editors. So if I have a bunch of friends on Twitter or Facebook, you can outsource your editing function to them and have a look at what they're reading and send that to me, and that's how this works. But you still need human editors of one form or another. So it either has to be editors you're paying to work out story selection or your friends. On the bottom of the Reuters homepage right now, this up here is the little ad unit that we have promoting counterparties. These are all external links right there on the Reuters homepage. And this is a standard, IAB-sized ad unit. And this is the one big idea which I really want to push to you guys. There's a bunch of interesting stuff which can be done here, but work with me here. Brand advertising is really hard to do on the internet, as you know, and it's expensive. And one of the big problems is that, one, people have trained themselves not to look at ads, and two, advertisers are still obsessed with ridiculously pointless notions like click-through rates. And we all know that only idiots click on ads, and the people who click on ads are not the people that you want to be reaching, and yet still people care about how many people are clicking on their ads. It's like, can someone please grow up here? And I know that Chris Batty, when he was at Gawker, was pushing the idea of the unclickable ad. He was like, we should make all of the ads we run on the site unclickable to just get people out of this ridiculous mindset of we want people to click on our ads. That, in the end, didn't go anywhere because trying to change the media industry is a fool's game. But I'm going to try anyway. I have a better idea. I don't want an ad which you can't click on. I want an ad which you can click on, but where the links go to unrelated third-party sites. That's this, by the way. This is kind of sort of an ad, but you click on any of these links, you go straight to that website. And it's not like one of those clever little, trackable links. So if you just mouse over those links, you will see at the bottom of your browser bar exactly the URL that you're going to at VanityFair.com or New York Magazine or wherever. And suddenly what has happened is that the ad unit has become an editorial unit. And it is driving people to stories that they want to read. And all brands want to become media locations in their own right. American Express has been doing this for forever. But that's really expensive. That involves building websites, keeping them on message, hiring editors. And people, especially smaller brands, don't have the time or the skill set or the inclination to do all that kind of thing. This is so much easier. Get yourself a few good links, update them every few hours or just once a day is fine. Put those links in an ad unit and place that ad around the web and then brand, maybe a little bit of branding at the top and the bottom. And what you have is, fantastic branding. You're sending people to great content, not your content, but someone else's content. And they love you for it. They're just like they love, Fark or TechMeme or any of the sites that they visit every day, which they love because they send them out to great new content. So think about this, a dynamic, constantly updated ad unit which you click on and you go somewhere else entirely. And you don't have to have any biz dev relationship. In fact, you shouldn't have any biz dev relationship with the people you're linking to. Because then it gets sleazy. And then you're like, oh, I'll link to you, and then you'll pay me for linking to you. No, none of that. Just create great, perfect links in a good editorial way, and people will love you. And if you don't know how to do that, we'll, white label this for you. Or if we won't, someone else will. My friend Bob Cottrell has a site called The Browser. He has a little widget you can put on your site, which does much the same as this. I'm sure if you ask him nicely, he'll white label that for you, and he'll allow you to, to brand his links with your brand. It's a great little business model, and that is my idea for you. And at this point, Mike's going to come back and ask me some questions, I think. Exactly. Or you guys were going to ask me some questions.
Right. So we have two mics set up here, there and there. And so if you have a question for Felix, you can just come on down right now and ask it. And while people trickle down to the mics, I want to thank you very much for first depressing us and then attacking us. All right. Not everybody at once. I have a question for you, which I'd like to start off with. And again, please come up with your own. But you talked about payments in Europe, you talked about payments in the US. Payments are going to take over advertising. Why don't we see that across other media? In other words, I pay for cable TV, but I don't pay for most TV I watch. I don't pay for the free newspapers. There's a lot of things I don't pay for.
Well, I mean, newspapers are interesting. I mean, free newspapers are actually the exception rather than the rule. Now, anyone who understands the newspaper business understands that newspapers are basically free. What you're paying for is the cost of printing and delivering the bloody thing, and you're not really paying for the content. But consumers think they're paying for the content. They don't actually they have no interest in paying for a lump of paper. What they want is the news, which is on that paper. And they're willing to pay for that. And they have been for hundreds of years. They're not willing to pay for it online for various different reasons, largely surrounding the incredible brokenness of the payment system. But that's changing as well. And we're seeing on the iPad much more willingness. I think one of the great things which Apple has done with the App Store and with the iTunes Music Store is, one of the smartest things it's done is it's got people into the habit. Every time you download a free app onto your phone, you have to type in your password. Just as you do when you're paying money. They're getting you into that habit of just paying, making it as difficult to buy a free ad as it is to buy a pay ad, so that it's no harder to do that. And then people are getting more and more comfortable with making these like 99 cents, $1.99, that kind of thing, these kind of payments, which is not far off what newspapers cost. Now, if that's micropayments, it's not like ultra micropayments. If we manage to get down to the sub-dollar payments from over the past 10, 15 years, and I think the world would be a very different place right now. And as I say, I don't know when this is going to happen. It's not going to happen soon. But people actually, it's just a question of habituation, really. Things which they're used to paying for, they're happy to pay for. Things which they're not used to paying for, they're not happy to pay for.
All right. Eric?
I'll step up and ask a question. So I asked you this question in the green room, and you didn't give an answer, but now you have to. Which is, if the world really does go to hell, what happens to advertising?
Well, it goes down, as you know. I mean, we run through this in common or garden recessions all the time, that the first thing that companies do when they start hitting a real cash crunch is they cut their ad budgets. It's an easy place to cut. It doesn't involve firing anyone. They don't know what kind of, vague, hand-wavy future revenues they might be losing as a result of doing this. They move from being in growth mode to sort of in survivorship, hunker-down mode. And often you find that the companies which don't cut their ad budgets in a recession are the ones which wind up coming out with great momentum. But sometimes they have no choice, and that happens in every single recession. It happens especially in the really big, nasty, hairy recessions, and it's going to happen again. So then the question is, for you guys, what happens when people cut their ad budgets? Do they cut in other media? Do they cut online? Do they do both? And is online media now a big enough thing that you can actually save real money by cutting your online ad budgets? And I think the answer is probably yes. No?
We'll see. I think the 15 years we've seen advertising online grow and grow and grow and grow. We're close on $100 billion of digital spend globally, and it may be that if the ad market sneezes, we will catch a cold. But that hasn't been the case to date. And I think, there's been this theory that online has been more accountable and more effective, potentially per dollar, than other media. If we take away clicking and we start sending all of our content to unrelated publishers, that may not be the case.
It's true. But yeah, and this is actually, but I think the online ad industry really ought to be getting out of this obsession with metrics and measuring everything, because you wind up doing the wrong thing. You wind up doing what you can measure instead of what's most effective. And this is exactly why I'm pushing this. It's because, Why do people pay enormous amounts of money for glossy ads in Vogue magazine? It's not because they can measure the results. It's because they know, it's because they know how brand advertising works. And no one's been able to make brand advertising work online. So instead what they do is like, what you're doing and things which they can measure or think they can measure. In fact, I think the people who think they can measure the efficacy of online advertising are largely deluding themselves. They can measure something, and so the thing that they measure they call efficacy or whatever. But in fact, it's just the thing that they can measure, really.
So you buy Vogue for the ads?
Yes.
That's right.
Well, no, seriously.
Tweet that.
I mean, how many people here buy Vogue magazine? Well, not very many. But of you buy it for the ads, right? I mean, that's why you buy Vogue. I mean, the edit is a kind of few bits and pieces. This is actually one of the interesting things about Vogue and most of the big glossy magazines. Vogue in particular. The lion's share of the effort and the money on the editorial side goes into a sort of story well, which is way at the back of the book, which most people don't even reach. The fashion industry reads those stories. And mostly, actually, who reads those stories is the advertisers. The advertisers read the edit, and the readers read the ads. The advertisers read the edit because they want to see, which photographers are being used, which models are being used. The edit's a little bit ahead of the curve normally. They want to, learn from that and incorporate those ideas into their next campaigns. But the readers, they, sit there in the first 150 pages of the September issue of Vogue are ads. It's nothing but ads. If people read the edit, then the advertisers would insist on being opposite edit. That never happens in Vogue.
You're out of my subject matter expertise. But I believe you. We'll have to go to the jury on that one. Go ahead.
So I have kind of a question on that similar topic. If measurement and efficiency are simply the things that can be measured, and that's not sort of the nirvana of brand advertising, which is presumably some sort of emotional connection that a consumer has with a brand in terms of either desire or what have you. If that's the assumption in the discussion, how does the model that you talked about, where it was kind of this curated source of links, and maybe you have Apple or AT&T or whatever it may be, or Louis Vuitton sort of around it, I guess I'm struggling to see how that gets us closer to brand advertising in terms of building that desire or that, the Vogue effect that you sort of described.
It's a good question. I mean, and you need to try it and do it, and the smarter you are about curating and filtering those links, the better you'll be. But how much do you love Twitter? How much do you love Facebook? How much do you love, for that matter, tech meme? How much do you love people who will understand what you're interested in and send you to those places? You have a strong connection there, and that you get incredible loyalty. And the reason why people go back, the reason why Facebook is so sticky, the reason why Twitter is so sticky is because they're so good. People are so loyal. And I feel like that kind of thing has to be doable. That maybe I'm wrong, but it's worth a try.
Cool. Okay. I'm not promising to do it though.
Terry?
Okay, Felix, so let me get this straight. You've scared the shit out of us about the global economy. And then the second part was, I thought that was where the good news was coming, and you scared the shit out of us about the death of advertising. It feels, though, maybe a little bit different on this end, and I'd maybe push back a little bit. I mean, what many of the people in this room, I think, are trying to accomplish is taking, data-enriched, technology-enabled advertising, really taking what was once an art and arguably, questionable performance and value, and really fundamentally changing advertising. The reason why people advertise is to sell product, goods or products. And as you turn from an art to a science, in theory, you can perfect advertising, and perfected advertising is called e-commerce, payments, in your example. And I think what you were describing is getting down the payment funnel. My question is, or maybe it's a comment, and maybe for your reaction, is in this new world of science-ified sort of advertising, if you will, we're in fact changing advertising from what has been historically thought of as a discretionary expenditure, moving it up the income statement into something that's actually cost of goods sold, maybe even perhaps a revenue driver, if you can make direct links between expenditure and then outcome. And so I think many people in this room would say that digital advertising has a huge opportunity ahead of it that is in fact helping work through to commerce and payments. And if it helps, I've already got the glasses. Perhaps I could talk in a British, somewhat nasally voice and say, direct digital advertising has got enormous opportunity.
You're right. You're right. I'm not going to disagree with that. I think you're absolutely right. Digital advertising has enormous opportunity. I think that I think that the opportunity, though, is, I wouldn't say orthogonal to what you said. I think it's more than what you said. I think that there are things that you can measure. People get very excited about being able to measure things. And then you sort of extrapolate, oh, look, we can measure things. And then the logical next step, as you say, is this is cost of goods sold. This is just simply a part of how we are driving our revenues. Classic example being Groupon. It has a marketing spend, which it can dial up or dial down. And when it dials up, it gets more customers. And when it dials down, it gets less new customers. And it values the marginal value of each new customer, however much it values it at. And then once it's reached enough new customers, it'll dial down its marketing spend. And this is all very scientific, and they've got it down to a science. Good for them. Brilliant. But I think there's more to advertising than that. And I think that it's a little bit hubristic on the part of the digital advertising elite to imagine that everyone who was doing brand advertising for the past 50 years just had no idea what they were doing. I mean, there were some very, very smart people doing some very, very smart things. And those things, they might not be as measurable as what you're talking about, but that doesn't mean that they don't work online.
That was the first time anybody in this room has ever been called hubristic. All right, last question.
Hi, Felix. I have a question for you regarding payments. And you can notice on my accent that I'm not American, so...
So when was the last time you wrote a check?
Sorry?
When was the last time you wrote a check?
I mean, I'm French, so we use a lot of check. Sorry for that. But beside that, to bring a European perspective, you opposed, you feared that there could be an opposition between payment and audience to some extent. I think that first, we actually pay for content. We pay ISPs, we pay cable TV, so we pay the people that bring the content to us instead of paying the people that design the content for us. Yes. So we already pay for something and nothing is really free.
Yes.
And instead of opposing the audience and the payments, maybe there should be a nice story if we successfully bring them together. Because one of the problems that we had to face during the past decade is a pressure on price downwards, because there was even more, every year more inventory on the market, and then the prices were going down. If you put some micropayment devices, which is happening now in Europe on most of the editorial website or online gaming website, then basically the available inventory for advertisement is decreasing a bit, but you can counterbalance that by an increase in price. Yeah. And actually, you're going to, in this way, finance even better the advertising industry and also the publishing industry, which is core, because if the publishing industry is not living in the right way, then the aggregators, the curators don't have anything to comment or aggregate.
Yes, completely agree with all of that. And one of the things which, you all know is the CPMs at paywalled sites are, enormous, well into the triple digits. You want, things which decrease inventory and make it more valuable and more targetable are fantastic, and micropayments is a way of doing that. And your point about the ISPs is absolutely well taken. We have now had a decade of broadband opportunity in this country. We have had 10 years, give or take, maybe a bit more, of people given the choice. They're saying, listen, if you want to pay a monthly bill in that sort of $40 range, you say somewhere between 40 and 80 bucks, you have a choice. You can buy broadband or you can buy cable TV. And the people have spoken. Cable TV has something like 85% penetration or something in the US. Broadband has like 40, 45, it's tiny in comparison. People are not choosing to spend money on broadband. Now, we all love the elite, for the top half of the population. We are the, 1%. So that's great for us, but think about that. It means that people actually, they're finding it too expensive to get online to make that payment. If we can bring that down and make that free, and then allow people to pay on a micro level on a case-by-case basis, then you actually get much more penetration. And, and so we've all been hearing for years about the cord cutting, about how people are going to cut their cable TV and move to just broadband. No one does it. And the only people who do it are the ultra-information elite, people like me, right? People who really love being online and being interactive and being news junkies and that kind of thing. Real people don't do that. Real people love sitting back on their couch and they will pay astonishing amounts of money to their cable providers for the privilege of being able to do so. And that is why television advertising is still orders of magnitude greater than online advertising.
Merci beaucoup, my friend.
All right. Felix, thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Cheers.
Very good job.